All right, welcome to the YouTube first video, and today we're going to be exploring the three roots of all disease and illness. So there are many branches off of these roots, but what we're going to be doing is formulating a functional approach to addressing those branches off the roots. For example, a branch may be cancer, bronchitis, asthma, eczema, right? These are conditions or symptoms, right? But deep down, there are these roots. And what we're going to do is we're going to learn to address those roots and heal the body from the inside out, right? So, what are those three roots? Those three roots are going to be inflammation, digestion, and genes, okay? So, obviously, right, you know what those are, but there's going to be components to each of these, four components to each of them mainly. So, let's look at for genes, we have food, movement, environment, and mindset. So, your genetic code, as we know with epigenetics now, is always fluctuating, right? It's basically being your genome, right? Well, the thing that makes your genetic code is being bathed in hormones and pheromones and all these things all the time. And that is actually adjusting your genetic code, right? It's modulating your genetic code. And these are the things which directly impact that genetic code. So good food is going to keep your genetic code modulated because you're going to be getting the micronutrients you need, right? Bad food is going to alter your genetic code in a negative way because you'll become very chemically imbalanced and this shifts your code, right? So movement is another necessary thing, right? When you're becoming stagnant, your genetic code does not have the ability to essentially respirate or breathe. It needs to breathe, right? It needs to experience like blood flow. These are all necessary components to maintain genetic code. Environment, right? If you're in a moldy environment, if you're in a dirty, dusty environment, your genetic code or your genome is constantly being bathed in toxins, and this will affect it negatively. And then mindset. So we'll learn more about this later, but your mind and your gut essentially is connected through the vagus nerve, right? This is the nerve or the wandering nerve, which wanders up and down your spine and basically controls the hormones in your body. So mindset is fundamental to this because when you're in a bad mindset, you're releasing bad hormones, which then are bathing the genome in these negative hormones like cortisol, right? Cortisol is not inherently negative, but if you're in a bad mindset, too much cortisol is very negative, right? So your mindset is very important. Next, digestion. So obviously your digestion is super important for a myriad of reasons, but most importantly, you need to absorb your nutrients. If you're eating food and you're not absorbing anything meaningful from it, you might as well just not be eating it, right? And your body's then becoming micronutriently deficient. We're going to go back to these themes throughout it, like you need to be micronutriently sufficient, minerally sufficient, vitaminally sufficient. You need to be moving, right? These are just kind of the fundamental things that you need to maintain. You need to have a balanced pH, right? But let's get into the digestion, right? So we got microbial. So that's your gut microbiome. It has these things called microbes in it, which is essentially your kind of the kingdom of your gut, right? And they're the things that make up the bacterial formulation of your gut. And if this is imbalanced, then you'll have a chemical imbalance throughout your entire body because your gut affects your entire body. So we need to balance the microbial. Next, structural. This is more like fundamental, like what is the shape and size of the food you're eating? How big are you? You know, like are there any birth defects? You know, are you born special? Like get into that. It's not as important, still important. Chemical, very, very linked to the microbial, is essentially, and that's where the pH comes in. Hydrochloric acid, like is your body chemically balanced? What we'll learn is that the body is a biochemical system which relies on this balance. It relies fundamentally on the balancing of chemicals to create a well-functioning being. If your body is not balanced in the main minerals, so for example, magnesium, zinc, copper, etc. There's a million. Your body won't function correctly because it doesn't have the chemicals to do so, right? Especially enzymes, right? Chemical is going to be very linked to enzymes because that has a lot to do with the digestion process. Since this is coming from the digestion, you need the proper enzymes to break down your food, because what happens if you don't have the enzymes to break down your food, then your microbes are not being fed the right things. Then you have a microbial imbalance, which will then contribute back to a lack of chemicals. And this becomes a reciprocal process where you can spiral downwards without even knowing. This is important. Next, we have mechanical. Mechanical, these are things like swallowing, chewing. I've had people that have these huge digestion problems, which leads to like inflammation, skin problems, asthma, all these problems straight up because they're not chewing enough. Because when you're chewing, your tongue and your mouth is releasing enzymes. Not only is it releasing enzymes, but it is releasing mucus in your stomach. So when you don't chew, not only are you not getting the necessary nutrients out of it, your body is working much harder to absorb what it can get out of it. And we'll learn more about the small intestine. But the small intestine can't deal with that. So then all this nutrient-dense food gets to the large intestine, which the large intestine is not meant to deal with. This then places massive stress on your large intestine, and then your liver to detoxify, and then your excrement system, right? Pooping. You're not gonna have good poops, and this all is a cycle, right? You see, like mechanical chewing, this is very, very closely linked to chemical because you need the right enzymes. But the way you chew, the way you swallow, what you eat together is very, very linked to the release of enzymes, right? And that's linked to the microbial, and they all play into each other. And then the hormones that are being released are linked to the genome, and that goes back to the food. If you're not moving, your environment, right? And even mindset, right? Because the gut-brain connection, if you're not digesting your food, then you're releasing the wrong hormones in your brain. When you're releasing the wrong hormones in your brain, you have a chemically imbalanced system. Of course you're going to have a bad mindset. But then this bad mindset feeds back into it, right? So this is an incredibly, incredibly complex and interrelated cycle that we're going to learn to discover, because this is why this is the root, right? It's the root because it's so interconnected. It's so sophisticated within itself. And without coming back to these three things, just addressing symptoms, you'll never realize these things, right? It's very interesting. So anyway, inflammation is the last one. And inflammation can very much be a product of these two, as can the others. But the four core components, first of all, the four ways you spot inflammation are, this has been long documented, right? Heat, swelling, pain, and redness, okay? These are the four qualities of inflammation. And we'll kind of understand why these things happen. But essentially, when your body gets inflamed, your lymphatic system and your immune system sets off ringers. We're inflamed, there's a problem here. It lets go of these things called cytokines, and these trigger to immunoreceptors, white blood cells. This is a problem. It then rushes blood to that point. There's things called macrophages, which will kind of envelop the inflammation or the bacteria or whatever is there that's causing the problem, and the repair system will begin with these white blood cells. So when there's redness, right, and heat, that's a rush of blood to the place to address the problem. When there's swelling, that's your macrophages, which are actually enveloping bacteria or the problematic places to protect yourself, right? And pain is that neuroreceptor release telling your body you need to do this. Very, very cool. But there are four elements of inflammation. So we have enhance, which is like you need to enhance absorption of your body, right? We can do this through omega-3s. We can do this through certain fatty acids. Just an enhancement of your inflammatory defense. Modulate. We can modulate. the modulation of inflammation is essentially like tolerances, right? Stress, certain things like that. Like you can modulate your tolerance by modulating consumption or by modulating consumption of other things to address the deficiencies, right? You can constantly be modulating inflammatory triggers to affect the inflammatory response. Next, we have clear. This one is related to the regulation of your system. So this is nervous system, heart rate, parasympathetic nervous system, etc. Basically the things that are keeping your body clear, right? If you're in a state of cortisol release all the time, then that is going to lead to huge inflammation. It's going to lead to digestive issues and genome issues, right? So we have to make sure we have a regulated system. And then calm, which is, again, kind of that, like, how is your stress? How is your body's response? Is your body constantly fighting something? Because if you don't have time to be calm, you don't have time to release the proper endorphins that allow your body to regenerate. Even things like serotonin are necessary for regeneration of tissue, regeneration of bones, literally every important structure, because your body thrives on these endorphins and it needs them. Your body is kind of like it's like a constant signaling system. Like everything's like constantly signaling each other. And you can imagine it like that. And you can imagine when they're signaling that there's always a problem, there is always going to be a problem. Like that is a spiral effect, right? So the one thing I hope you notice here is that they're all extremely interconnected and interlinked. One problem is going to affect all three of these roots, no matter where you cut it, right? A digestive issue is going to affect your genome, and it's going to give you inflammation. It's natural. Inflammation is naturally going to affect your genome, and it's going to affect your digestion. A genetic problem is going to give you inflammation, and it's going to give you digestive problems. And even if you're not having like digestive, like, oh, my stomach's rumbling, oh, I'm bloating, gas, right? Which a lot of times they are, or you are. But it's not always going to manifest that way. But you having an absorption problem, you not getting the right things out of your nutrient, or getting the right nutrients out of your food, is a huge digestive problem. And it may manifest as inflammation, but it doesn't make it an inflammation problem. It makes it a digestion problem that's impacting your other two roots, right? So we'll learn to kind of go and be an investigator for these systems, understand where is this coming from, test out things and understand, I don't think this is the root actually, I think this is the root. So we'll try this. And this comes through understanding the digestive tract, which I'm going to do a video on next. The digestive system and the gut microbiome is the foundation of all health because it is the king of your hormones. It controls all your hormones and it controls basically the chemical balance in your entire body. If you have a leaky gut, for example, and toxins are being released into your bloodstream constantly, there's no way you won't have inflammation. There's no way you won't have a damaged genome, right? So we're going to get into that. That's very important. And then we'll go through more things like urinary system, immune system, both the inside and the outside. We'll learn kind of about acne, about the skin. I've had eczema for all my life and asthma for all my life. And I've learned that, a lot of that is an immune response and it's a gut problem because the gut is part of the same immune system, which is the skin. The skin connects the gut, the respiratory system, and the outside of the skin to the inside of the skin, right? So when you have these like breakouts, or when you have asthma, it can be related to the quality of your gut because that is literally a part of your skin system. That's unbelievable to me. And in a world where we're trying to address all these symptoms, it does not make sense when you understand that they're all rooted in the same thing, right? To address one of them makes no sense without addressing all of them, because it's just going to come back. It's just going to come back probably worse, right? So this is a loose intro to holistic health and understanding the body in a more deep way, in a more complete way, and understanding how you can get to the root cause of inflammation and disease rather than just simply addressing symptoms, which will come back. So yeah, I look forward to teaching the digestive system, which will be a lot more in depth and going farther, but this is my first video on the YouTube, so yes sir.